Hey, Bastish Beer for 64K, and welcome to another one-off special. This one called
Hello and welcome to Turrican. Be my guest. Another day, another cry. But remember, shoot or die.
So before we go any further, in case you're unfamiliar with this game series, here's a little crash course in Turrican lore. The Turrican game series consists of 5 games released between 1990 and 1995. They are, in a sense, open-level run-and-gun Metroidvania style games with tons of secrets to find and even more weapons to use. They are some of the best representations of this style of game to come out of the European gaming scene in the early to mid-90s. First we got Turrican, released in 1990, programmed by that mad C64 genius Manfred Trenz, originally designed for the Commodore 64. 1991's Turrican 2, a game iconically linked with the Amiga. Super Turrican in 1993 on the Super Nintendo. Then 1994's Mega Turrican on the Mega Drive, also known as Turrican 3 on the Amiga. And finally in 1995 we got Super Turrican 2 on the Super Nintendo. These games were released on a lot of other systems as well. I'm simply highlighting their most iconic versions, as well as being known for the ability to push the systems they were on to the limit in terms of graphics and level design. They are also known for their brilliant soundtracks by chiptune master himself, Chris Huelsbeck, who did the soundtracks on all 5 games. So in this video I'll be having a look at the recently released Turrican Flashback, which is available on the PS4 and the Switch. We'll be looking at the Switch version. I'll also be talking to the lead producer on this Turrican Flashback release, as well as the upcoming anthology series, about various aspects of these compilations, as well as talking to a Turrican veteran whose music compositions on the C64 and the Amiga are legendary. So without further delay, let's start checking this thing out. And here we are, Turrican Flashback on the Switch. So let's check out the menus before we dive into the games. As you can see, this compilation features the 4 most iconic games in their original form. And what I mean by that is that there's no director's cuts or special versions of the games. The options include various filters, wallpapers to get the game looking exactly how you want. We also get a save game option and the handy rewind function in case you launch yourself down one of the game's many death pits, and a built-in cheat menu if you're finding the game a little bit too hard. I asked Audi Sorlie, lead producer on this compilation, what the difference between this release and the upcoming anthology series.
My name is Audi Sorlie, and I was one of the producers on Turrican Anthology and Flashback. Yeah, so Turrican Flashback is the retail version of the anthology, which kind of brings together the core entries of the series at a lower price, which is more suitable for like Best Buy, Walmart, younger fans, or those who are just kind of moderate fans of Turrican that want to pick up the games quickly, play it again, just kind of relive some childhood memories, and then move on with their day. This is kind of that version for them. The anthology, the volume 1 and 2 that's coming out later, will be packed with more extras, more development history, video clips from the developers. It will come with a documentary on Blu-ray by myself and John Linman. There will be a music player in-game and many other things. We haven't announced everything for it yet, because we're still developing it. But yeah, so the Turrican Flashback is basically just modern friendly packaging that you can find on store shelves.
So these are all the 16-bit versions of Turrican. We got Turrican 1 and 2 on the Amiga, Mega Turrican on the Mega Drive, and Super Turrican on the Super Nintendo. And without further delay, let's jump on back to 1990, the year that heralded in the first of the series on the Commodore 64. Turrican was programmed by Manfred Trenz of Catechus and Enforcer fame, and if anyone knew how to push the Commodore 64 to the limit, it was him. I really loved how non-linear it was, which was a bit of a revelation at the time. It looked like an arcade game, but played like an adventure game with its tons of secrets to find and massive levels to explore, and even more stuff to blast. When I first started this Amiga version, I instinctively pushed up to jump, but the controls have been given a full modern makeover and work perfectly on new controllers. No more hunched over the keyboard to slap the spacebar to activate the blade move ever again. It all feels very natural and is a welcome addition, and I asked Audi about this subtle yet important tweak.
Yeah, so one of the first things we wanted to enhance when we started this collection was actually the controls, because I think for many of us, while we can go back to up to jump, most younger players I think finds this quite unnatural, and so I especially wanted to make sure that younger players as well as those who had grown up with Turrican could approach this collection and feel like it plays like new. It's kind of better than you remember to play it. And getting rid of the up to jump was kind of instrumental in that, and just placing the jump mechanic on the button makes a huge difference to how you can access the game. And not just the jump, but if you look at the rest of the face buttons, the entire arsenal of Turrican is actually now approachable by the entire controller. And it really makes a big difference. I personally could not go back to the Amiga control scheme after playing this.
The amount of blasting you do in this game is really insane and really maxed out the Commodore in so many ways. This Amiga version in this collection is just brilliant. Everything that made the C64 a classic version was remade by the guys at Factor 5 for its initial release in 1990. And let's not forget the music, as I asked my second guest, Chris Huelsbeck, what was the jump like going from the Commodore 64 tunes to the Amiga?
That was really easy for me because I had always hoped that I could make music with synthesizers, and so sampling the synthesizers into the Amiga and then having this whole new sound palette, that was really easy to upgrade. And also going from 3 voices on the Commodore 64 to 4 voices and then later 7 voices was definitely a liberation when it comes to composing.
What I love most about this original version though is the freedom to just play it however you want. You can just simply beeline it from left to right and take out the boss at the end of a level, or explore it meticulously and equip yourself out. It was totally up to you. The game comprised of 5 massive levels with each one broken into multiple parts, and truly brought top-notch arcade action and Metroidvania style gameplay so perfectly to computers of the time. And now it's time for the sequel. 1991 saw the release of Turrican 2 The Final Fight, released again on the C64 as lead, and Factor 5 doing the Amiga version, with Rainbow Arts distributing. Like all good sequels, everything that was cool in the first game just gets amplified tenfold, with more blasting action and another 5 massive levels to take on. The big difference though between the 8 and the 16-bit versions this time was the massive 26-track score that Chris put together for the Amiga version. I asked him whether this was planned or it was just something that evolved as the game was being made.
We all had the idea, I think, to top Turrican 1 once more and make it better in every way, and that included the music and sound, of course. One thing that we definitely wanted to do is to enhance the sound capabilities of the Amiga, for which we developed this 7-voice music player, whereas the Amiga normally has only 4 voices. And with the help of a colleague of mine, Jochen Heppel, we were able to pull that feature off on the Amiga.
Another thing I like about the sequel is the intense shooter stages, where the game flips genres and becomes an arcade-style horizontal shoot 'em up. It's no secret that I love gameplay switches, and this works absolutely perfectly to break up the 5 levels with some variation. This was another one I played like crazy on my C64, and I asked Audi what was the reason why the C64 versions are not part of this collection.
Yeah, so the C64 versions are missing, and I think I speak for everyone, both Factor 5, Strictly Limited, and the games, that we all wanted to include them, and we tried very hard to actually do so. I think the issue comes down to the legality of it, because the Rainbow Arts contracts from back then aren't as clear-cut as you would think. And there's still some things related to Turrican that's kind of in this kind of gray area, who owns what, who did what, and so on. And we had to kind of make a difficult call. Do we wait and try to untangle this, and maybe it's not even possible after all these years? We don't know where all these people are. Or do we just simply focus on the core Turrican series, that being the Amiga, Mega Turrican, Super Turrican, and rather than waiting and maybe someday getting the C64 versions in there, we decided to just focus on the core series, and who knows, in the future, maybe someone will figure it out.
Gameplay wise, there are subtle tweaks, like now you can use the blade move as much as you want. You also have a cool screen killing smart bomb, and the new laser lightning whip, which is indispensable for taking out those big bosses. I then asked Chris what was his major influences when composing the soundtracks for the first 2 games.
It was definitely heavy influenced by Japanese arcade arcade machines, and it generally, like, Japanese games on consoles and stuff like that were a very huge inspiration. And then just synthesizer music in general, and to that extent maybe like synthesizer rock and pop that I just listened in my spare time, and I always found those melodies and sounds fascinating, and they worked well with the game, particularly with the rock tempo.
And now on to Nintendo's 16-bit beast. Super Turrican was released in 1993 on the Super Nintendo and is not to be confused with Super Turrican on the NES, which is basically a remix of bits of Turrican 1 and 2. This, however, is a whole new entry. It's another excellent title by Factor 5 and is in a similar vein to Mega Turrican in terms of graphic style, although this is a lot more colorful and a lot less like an Alien movie. The biggest gameplay tweak this time around is the laser whip has been replaced by a freeze ray, which, as the name suggests, freezes stuff so you can blast it into pieces. It's a small tweak, but changes things up enough that you have to approach the action in a slightly different way, which makes it feel fresh. Of course, it goes without saying the soundtrack is stellar as usual, and I asked Chris what was the biggest difference composing on the Super Nintendo as opposed to the Mega Drive.
Yeah, I really like the Super Nintendo sound chip because it had 8 sampling voices right from the get-go. So anything that I would do in 7 voices on the Amiga would perfectly translate to the Super Nintendo. And so that was liberating. And then also the SNES had its own kind of flavor of sound, and this little effects chip that would do something similar to like a delay effect. And that also helped to make that sound somewhat special, and I really enjoyed working on the Super Nintendo.
Another knockout entry with probably the most diverse looking selection of stages in the entire series, and a game well worth sinking your teeth into. And now we're on to the final, 1994 entry. Mega Turrican was next, released in 1994 on the Mega Drive and Genesis. Due to distribution issues, the Amiga version titled Turrican 3 actually came out a year earlier, but the Mega Drive was the lead platform and it eventually saw the light of day thanks to Data East. The game has a much more mechanical alien vibe to it, very much in the vein of a Japanese-style console game of the time. The graphics were truly stunning to look at and animated extremely well. This version retains all the style to a T, and I asked Audi how they got the emulation so flawlessly to run on modern systems.
Yeah, so the emulation really had to be nailed, and you're right, it is as flawless as I think we could have gotten it, everything considered. The emulation is done by Ratalaika Games, who are incredible at what they do. In a collection like this, it's not as straightforward as I think many people would think, because in this collection we are actually collecting games from 3 different systems, all of which fundamentally very different and very hard to get right. So in the case of Turrican, it is not just a game that is known for its gameplay or known for its great graphics or known for its good music, it's known for everything. So you have to nail every aspect of the system and you can't take any shortcuts. For the emulation, what was the most difficult was the fact that the Amiga had not been really emulated on console before. I don't think there's been any other compilations that really focus on the Amiga, and we had to set out to do this from scratch. This turned out to be quite challenging because, as many people know, the music by Chris Huelsbeck is incredible, but also somewhat technically difficult. So I know that they really had to bust their chops to get this running properly, and Chris was actually very much involved in making sure that the music sounded perfect across all systems, Mega Drive, Super Nintendo, and the Amiga. So Ratalaika spent quite a few months just getting the systems up and running, and I was playtesting extensively, having worked in game preservation for many years now, and as well as the rest of the team at SLG, also very much involved, and of course the original team at Factor 5 would then do another playtest to make sure that all these games ran perfectly. And in the end, we finally got there. It wasn't easy, and really, the credit goes to Ratalaika Games. They really should be highlighted as some heroes of retro gaming, because they pulled off something that even I, at the beginning of this production, really wasn't sure ended up as good as it did.
The major new gameplay addition to this entry was the whip move, where you can bionic commando your way up to anywhere, and is instrumental in finding all the game's secret areas. It takes a little bit getting used to, but it works well once mastered. The music though is absolutely brilliant, and the Mega Drive has never sounded so good in terms of score and sound effects in unison. I asked Chris how he managed to knock out one of the system's best soundtracks on his first go.
It was probably the same idea that we had with the Amiga to push the envelope in every way possible. And I had a little bit of experience with programming FM because I had done some stuff on the PC with the AdLib card, and I was also familiar with the Yamaha DX7 synthesizer. So that was the main thing. But then we enhanced it also with 2 sample voices, and we used the other sound chip, the PSG, as well. So we had a total of 12 voices to work with all kinds of different ways, and that was also exciting for me as a composer to explore all these different synthesis options.
If I had to choose my favorite of the Turrican games overall, this would be it. For me personally, the nostalgia of the C64's Turrican 2 will always be there, but this was top quality arcade action to the max. And that's Turrican Flashback in a nutshell. A straight to the point, no nonsense collection of those 16-bit classics. I would also highly recommend picking up the Switch version, which makes Turrican on the go anywhere, anytime possible. And I simply couldn't let these two guys go without asking the question that everybody wants to know, myself included. Will we ever get to see a new Turrican game?
Yeah, so this is basically a question I get asked every day now after having started the work on this flashback anthology thing. And I certainly hope we get a new Turrican. I think it's time. I worked very closely with Huelsbeck over the years. I know how passionate the fans are. I personally grew up with Turrican, so I know how much I want a new entry. And I just want to see a 2D modern action game bringing Turrican back. I think everyone wants to see that, and hopefully if this collection does well, we'll see that sooner than later.
I certainly would hope so, that another part in the series could be developed, and I think we're laying the groundwork for that now with the re-release of the old ones.
And I'd just like to personally thank Audi Sorlie for providing me with this review copy and the interview, and of course to the great Chris Huelsbeck for indulging my dodgy questions. Thank you to you both. And thanks for joining me, Bastage B, at 64K. I hope you had a good time. If you can like and subscribe, they'll be greatly appreciated. I'll see you next time. Cheers.